say the game is getting old. Monday morning and your coffee's cold. Life is not what you want it to be. You need another chance to be who you want to be, yeah. You say that things don't ever change.
Hi everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and wow, we have an amazing show. I know, every week it's amazing. It's great, Jay. How can shows be amazing and great every week? Well, it's because I got great guests, and I got guests who got something to give back to you, and that's what makes it great, because that's what the show is about. It's about giving back to you and helping you grow and learn and helping you be able to be better and find that new direction in your life or your business or your career. And today I am so excited because we're going to have Ray Carr on the show. And you go, the Ray Carr from Cleveland? Yes, the Ray Carr from Cleveland is going to be on the show. And you go, really? The Renaissance man of Cleveland? The guy who is the right? Yes, and he's going to talk about podcasting and radio, because I know, I've been doing the show. This is the 35th show, by the way, I've done. And so here we are doing the show. And a lot of people want to know, should I do the podcast? Is it good for my business? Is it good for me? Is there some benefit for me or my business to even talk about, or maybe bring to folks about, should we do a podcast? Is this something worthwhile? And what do we need to do? Well, listen, Ray Carr has been in this business for decades. And so he's going to walk us through some of the challenges and some of the things and the reasons why. And we're going to have a lot of fun today. I promise you we will, because Ray is great. And even though Ray and I have never met face to face, I tell you, he's a friend. And I did his show probably 3 years ago when I wrote my first book, Got Social Mediology, and did his show then. And we have just become friends since then, and so I am so honored and privileged to have him on. But before we get started with Ray Carr today and podcasting and radio, and is it good for you, let's talk about you, and let's check in with the 4 areas of your life, right? I believe we are 4-part people. We are physical people, we are mental people, we are emotional people, and we are spiritual people. So checking in with you, let me ask you physically on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 being outstanding. How are you today? Right? Are you eating well? Are you doing the things that you need to do? Are you exercising? Is your body feeling good? Listen, I was sick for the last 4 days, so I wasn't great, but today I'm like, man, I feel really, really good. I haven't been able to get to the gym because I feel like I'm finally like ready to go. So I'll probably hit the gym later, this afternoon, but I feel great, but I know what it's like to be sick or ill. Right? So what is your number out there? Okay. What is your number? And thanks, Mike and Ben and let's see, who was all there? Lundy, Tom, Jim. Thanks for joining us, by the way. Appreciate you here on the Facebook Live show, and for you folks on who are listening by podcast. So what is your physical number today? 1's bad, 10's great. All right, you got that number? Okay, good. All right, let's talk about mentally. Where are you at? On a scale of 1 to 10, same scale. 1's miserable, 10's outstanding. Where are you at mentally? And what I mean by that is, what are you feeding your mind? What's going into your mind? What are you doing to exercise both halves of your brain, right? The left side of your brain is logical. The right side of your brain is creative. What are you doing to feed that, right? What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you learning? What are you doing to actually feed your brain, right? And are you doing that regularly? Is it something that you're doing on a regular basis? Are you growing, right? Because that's the key, right? The key is that you're constantly growing, because if you're not growing, you're dying, all right? Because we never stay static, right? Things pass us by. So what's that number? You got that? So we got 2 numbers. We got a physical number, a mental number. Okay, let's check in emotionally. Same scale, 1 being miserable, 10 being awesome. Where are you at emotionally? What I mean by that is, what's your emotional intelligence quotient right now? Right? Like, do the little things tick you off? Does life get and bother you, and all of a sudden emotionally you're just thrown at a loss, and you're not handling yourself emotionally? How are you emotionally right now? And by the way, emotional intelligence and your emotional quotient also is, how well are you able to relate to other people's emotions? Right? Because let's be honest with you, when you're able to relate to other people's emotions, you're going to be far more successful in every area of your life, whether that's in your career or your business or in your personal life, because we all want to be understood. So where are you at emotionally today? Okay, we got 3 numbers, right? The physical, mental, and the emotional. And then finally, the 4th area, where are you at spiritually, right? And people go, explain to me spiritually, right? Because people will say to me, I don't believe in God, right? But you are a spiritual being, right? You have faith in something. You believe in something, right? Even if you say science, right? You believe that science has all the answers. That's still faith, okay? But I don't know if that gives you a sense of joy or a sense of peace or a sense of calmness. So generally we believe in something that triggers us, that does that. And it could be karma, it could be nature, it could be a variety of things, and it could be God, okay? And if it is God, I always ask people the same question every week, and that is, if God is your source, then how are you doing in that relationship? How is that going for you, right? How would you say that is on a scale of 1 to 10? So you've got 4 numbers, your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual numbers. So now you got to think of those 4 numbers as the legs of a table, all right? If they're uneven, it's going to be pretty hard to eat off of an uneven table. And if they're too low and you're sitting in a normal chair, it's going to be very hard to eat off of a low table. So what are you going to do to improve that? And when I say improve these areas of your life, I'm not asking you to get to a 10. If you are a 3 in any one of those areas, what are you going to do to get to a 4? If you are a 6, what can you do to get to a 7? And if you're a 9, what can you do to get to a 10? Right? What do you need to change about you in any of areas of your life to get you to the next level? Right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be something big. It could be something as simple, if it's a physical thing, let's say you're physically a 4. It could be that, all you need to do is just get a little more exercise, maybe take an extra walk, right? Maybe just get into the gym, maybe just get on the treadmill for a few extra minutes. Maybe it's putting down the fork. Maybe it's stop eating sweets. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It just needs to be a change that's in the right direction. And speaking of a right direction and a new direction, I can't tell you how excited I am about our next guest, because Ray Carr is Cleveland's Renaissance guy. I mean Renaissance guy. I mean Renaissance guy. So he's got the Ray Carr Show, right, which is WCSB FM. Right. And then he's got raycarram.com, which you can, and by it's Carr with 2 R's, by the way. He's interviewed probably every musical legend you could probably think of. He's interviewed legends of the acting industry, and just amazing. He's just got a resume that just keeps going on. He's an encyclopedia of knowledge of pop culture. Ask him anything about music, and he can walk you through that. By the way, he is a Cleveland native. He went to Lakewood High School in Cleveland. For those of you who know that, he went to Cleveland State University, where he majored in communication and sports management. He is a baseball hockey freak. He is a DJ. He is an MC. He does trivia. The guy is literally a Renaissance man and is knowledgeable. And today he is brought to us by Inline Business and Brokers and Advisors. And they partner with business owners when it's time to sell their businesses. When it's time to sell your business, contact the professionals at Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. You can learn more at enlign.com. That's ENLIGN.com. And without further ado, welcome, please, to the show, everybody, Ray Carr. Ray, welcome to the New Direction.
Oh, Jay, you have no idea what an honor it is to be on your program. I mean, I've read your books, I've talked to you many times, and you've been an unbelievable inspiration to me to keep going, to find new ways to be better at what I do. And I've never, I just listen to what you say, and I go, yeah, he's right. And you are really a beacon of light for me.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ray. So, Ray, how many years have you done radio?
About 17 years, and I've done different kinds of radio. I was on a talk show where we mainly did old-time radio shows from the 30s and 40s. I was with a couple of other people doing that. Then I have done just regular talk radio. I've done kind of a combination. Is what I do now is I play obscure old music from the 50s and 60s, and the other half is I'll interview somebody that's either an author, a musician, an actor, all over the map. And so I kind of balance the two by doing that because I have an audience that likes both. And I do a lot of, I do podcasts around the city of Cleveland. I interview different people around, that are authors, and they do all sorts of things. And I do that too. And I host trivia shows and DJ parties, and I do everything there is to do in broadcasting.
That's awesome. So what caused you to get into this crazy industry of wanting to do broadcasting and media?
When I was young in Cleveland, there was a talk show host in Cleveland named Pete Franklin, and he was the only sports show in town. At that time in the 70s, we only had one show. He was on 7 to midnight, and I would listen to him every night. And I go, I would love to do this. But Pete Franklin was so well educated, and I thought, boy, I'd really have to work hard to come close to that. Then I got a little bit older and listened to Larry King's talk show on radio, not on TV as much, but on radio. And I wanted to interview people kind of like Larry King, because I found it interesting how he would spend hours talking to different people and getting into their heads and extracting valuable information out of them that otherwise in a quick interview you'd never get. And I'd listen to him on the way home from doing DJ gigs, and I go, this is what I want to do.
So just to give the folks just an idea, who would you say was the greatest interview that you felt like you landed when you were doing interviews?
I would say, and there's been a couple of them, and I've done 500 or so interviews, but I would say Petula Clark, the great singer from England, who's been my all-time favorite singer. She is just absolutely remarkable. Alison Armgren, she was Little Nasty Nellie on Little House on the Prairie. I think she was phenomenal. Very open, just talked freely. Charlotte Ray, the late great Charlotte Ray, Mrs. Garrett on Facts of Life. She was very, very kind, and she opened up to me and told me about her life, her alcoholism, and she was just. We just took our time with all that stuff. And Peter Noon of Herman's Hermits was also very good. But, it's when you get them to relax and open up and tell you what they didn't really want to tell you at first, but then they felt comfortable with you, and they just, like you were sitting down at a table having a beer, and they would just open up to you. And those are the magical moments.
Didn't you interview Rich Little? Did I remember that?
Yes, that's another one. That's correct. I did interview Rich Little, and at first, the interview went a little slow, and then Rich and I began just to kind of relax and talk, and then he would just open up about his life in Canada. He came to the United States. He did some Johnny Carson, and and all that stuff. That's how it happens. You just take it step by step, and really the whole idea of the interview is to give the audience some information about the guest that they either knew, but go beyond that. Try to go beyond what people would expect. And those are the ones that go, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. That's interesting. That's what you want them to say at the end of the interview. And even if they didn't know who the guest was, at the end of the interview, then they'll maybe look them up, or, they have, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah. We're with Ray Carr, by the way, Cleveland's Ray Carr, the Cleveland's Renaissance man, Ray Carr.
Too kind.
We're with him today and on the New Direction. And we're talking about radio and podcasting because, Ray, one of the things that podcasting has become huge. And by the way, it's a huge industry. I mean, this is I think it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And,
it is.
And radio has lost a little luster, but it's changing. It's not that we're not listening to live radio. We're consuming more podcasting. And the numbers are astronomical. Every year, it just increases so much. And you've had to change the way right? I mean, because you've changed the way you have to do your shows.
Yeah, absolutely. I do live interviews. Well, I record my interviews and I put them up on the website, and then I run them on my radio show on Tuesday. But yes, the whole industry of radio has changed. Everybody's going to podcasts. Very few people listen to traditional radio, and that's really where it's going. So I kind of have to split my interviews between the different places. But when I'm doing them, it's kind of like what you're doing with me. I mean, we'll record this. It'll be on Facebook Live, and then we'll just play it put it up on a podcast site where people can then access it at any time they'd like.
Yeah, and I think, Ray, haven't you found that the reason why people want a podcast is because they can be in control of what they want to hear or not want to hear?
Totally. That's another thing. They're not bound by the FCC regulations where they have to worry about what they can and can't say.
Right.
They're free to talk and do whatever they want. And if you don't like the interview, you can always edit some of it out, but you have that freedom, and you could talk to whomever you like, just about anything, and as many people as you like. So for the host of the podcast, it gives you immense freedom. And it's much more comfortable. When you're on radio, you got to take breaks constantly.
Right.
And with the podcast, we can just talk for hours.
Right. And so that's the other thing, right? Because I don't have to. I'm not bound by a producer who tells me I have, you've got to do something at such and such a time. I do have a sponsor, by the way. It's Inline Business Brokers and Advisors, inline.com, ENLIGN.com. But by the way, I'm not forced to say that. It just happens to be. I'm not like on the radio having to go, don't forget to mention our sponsors. Don't forget to mention the advertisers. I do that and try to do that because Inline has been very gracious to purchase basically the show. And it's not a lot, but it's what they're doing is they're basically paying that I don't have to pay to keep the show on the air. And so they basically are paying for, my hosting and everything else so that I don't have to do that. And so, I do that out of gratitude, not because there's a producer behind me saying that I have to do this. Now, let me ask you this. You've been in this world from radio to podcasting, right?
Yes.
Yes. And so for you, what has been the best or what's the best and the worst of that transition?
The most difficult thing about the podcast is trying to get the right kind of guest on a regular basis. And we do a podcast in a bar called Gunzelman's in Fairview Park. So we have to get different guests to come in each and every week. I have to host it, so it's kind of up to me and, the owner of the bar too, to try to land the right guests that would be not only interesting live, but also interesting on tape. So we got to try to get that person. That's a difficult thing to do. Once I'm behind the microphone, everything falls into place. I never get nervous. It's a piece of cake for me. But it's really getting to that point that's the hardest, to get somebody that people are going to want to listen to and find engaging.
Right. And people want to use this media. Listen, this is our 35th show. I don't know if I said that or not on the air. I said it off the air. But this is our 35th show that we have done. And this, for me personally, has been something that I chose to do because I felt like it could help a lot of people. And so I created this niche. Does this show help me, like with my coaching business and the things I author and my speaking? Of course it does, right? But the show was really built around wanting to help people because it's something that I've always wanted to do, and this is what I have chosen to make it about. Finding that niche, finding that thing, is it easy? Is it hard? Or how do you need to go about doing that, in your opinion?
I think what you have to do is, what I started doing is experimenting and finding out what is comfortable for me to do. And for me, honestly, it's a one-on-one interview with somebody. And once I sit down and I lock in with them, no matter what happens, I know I can handle it. Sure. And I could pretty much always bring the best out of that person. But it's got to be in a setting where we're locked into, I'm focused in on exactly what the guest's premise is. And I have to know when to steer the conversation in one direction or another, because sometimes things do get off the track a little bit. You got to have the talent, and you have to know I guess the most important thing, Jay, is you have to be aware of the moment that you're in, and exactly when it's time to do something, when it's time to let the guest speak, when it's time to cut in, and when it's time to add something. And those are techniques that take a long time to develop. Some hosts are really good at that, and some need a lot of work in that area. But really, it's about knowing how long to let your guest go on for, because sometimes they either can ramble too long, or they're not really on the topic as well as they should. And there's subtle ways that you can get them back on the topic, so the listener then will benefit more from that.
Yes. Yeah. See, I think this is about your, several things in there that I heard you say. I think one is when it comes to doing whatever show you're choosing to do, and, whether you're doing, my show or your show, or if somebody's choosing to do a show, is you've got to be comfortable with whatever your subject matter is, right? And stay on that subject matter. Because I think one of the things, about doing a new direction is we talk to authors and professionals about what they do. And then I translate that into how can this help people? Right. And that is my goal. And that's my mission for the show. How can I do what I do to help as many people in 3 areas, right? The life, career, and the business. And I think for you hear it and go, okay, you know what? We're doing this fun show in this tavern or wherever we're doing an entertainment show, and we're going to entertain people because we're going to have entertaining guests, or we're going to do a music show where we're going to have musical guests, and that's our niche. And I think, being clear on that, first of all, is so important, because as I hear you, because it doesn't confuse the audience. And then the second thing I heard you say is it's got to kind of line up with your talents, personality, and passion, because you got to have some passion about it. It's not just that you can, right? I mean, it's not just that you can.
No, you're right, Jay. 110% right. If you don't have passion for what you're doing, it'll come through the radio. People will feel that, and that's, you have to have that. And the other thing I didn't mention is when you're speaking to somebody, whether it's a topic that's highly sensitive or it's, a little more of a kind of a relaxed topic, you have to be prepared. You have to know what you're talking about. You can't just BS your way through things. You've got to be prepared. And if you're not prepared, the audience will also see through that. Right. And you lose credibility that way. So really, you have to know what you're speaking about. And if you're going to do an interview with somebody, don't do it unless you're really confident that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I have to be honest with the audience and you. Before I took on this whole A New Direction show, before I decided to do this, I had spent a year and a half on the Jiggy Jaguar Experience, which is a nationally syndicated radio show that goes out to over 50 plus terrestrial radio stations live, as well as on internet stations across the country. And I was doing a segment on the show called the Internet Doctor segment, and he gave me 15 minutes to 20 minutes to do a segment of the show, and I had to be prepared every show. I had a format that we had to follow, and we did the show every week. And then it eventually landed into, he liked what I did and asked me if I would do co-interview guests and authors, and he would send me their byline or tell me this is the name of the book. And then I started interviewing on his show. I started interviewing authors, and we were doing this author to author segment, which I totally enjoyed. And it took me a year and a half to kind of really figure out how to, interview, because it's really true, right? Learning how to interview is really, really important if you're going to talk to people.
Yeah. Well, I listen to the way they answer a question. I listen to subtleties in their voice. And if you really listen to somebody's voice, you can pretty much tell what they're feeling inside, because they don't realize that they're saying certain words or phrases the way they're saying it sometimes. And that, which gives me a cue when to speed things up, slow things down. I can gauge by the way they speak on how I'm going to ask the next question. Mm. And it's taken me a long time to do that, but it's because you have to be a good listener. And that is the key. If you're a good listener, then you can become a good interviewer.
I love that. Hey, speaking of great listeners, I know I've got great listeners all over the world, right? And thank you, by the way, all the people in the UK, Merton, Cardiff, all those little areas. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Folks in Africa, I so appreciate you. Sweden, which is the second largest area that listens to the show. Thank you, Sweden. And India and all these places around the world. I am so grateful to you to listen. And my number one listening city in the United States, Chicago. Don't know why. but you are my number one listening to show. So I want to thank all my friends in Chicago and the Windy City. I love your city. And so thank you for listening. And while I'm listening, while I've got all these listeners, I also want to say to my listeners, listen, if you are a business owner, at some point, you're going to need the services of an experienced business broker, right? So selling your business is a huge decision. So make sure you build your deal team, starting with the experts at Nline Business Brokers and Advisors. You can learn more about Nline at nline.com. That's ENLIGN.com. And we thank them for sponsoring the show, and Ray Carr today, certainly, as we do that.
Jay, I wanted to mention real quick, our friends in Chicago, I'm a big fan of the Buckinghams. They were a great 1960s band out of Chicago. They're one of my favorites, and I play a lot of the music on my show.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The Buckinghams are a fantastic band. Dennis Stefano was their lead singer, and they had songs like Kind of a Drag, Hey Baby, They're Playing Our Song. Those were the classics from the 1960s.
Wow. Okay, the Buckingham. Any relation? Is Lindsay any relation to?
No. No relation at all.
Okay.
The band was just happened to be called the Buckinghams.
Oh, okay. All right.
But no,
well, listen,
there's no correlation.
Well, that's awesome. Shout out to the Buckinghams in Chicago, Illinois. We do appreciate you listening to the show, and you're my number one city in the United States. So, Ray, do you think it's a good idea, that business, when it comes to business, businesses or individuals or careers or something like this, is a podcast a good idea, a bad idea? It depends. What's the answer to the question? Should I be doing a podcast?
Well, that's a very good question, Jay. It really depends on the kind of business you have. And if you have a business like a consulting business, and you're going to do something like that, you have to have the right host in which to do it. Sure. Then you have to get the right guests that are going to feed into the idea, the premise of what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to get across to the audience. Because if you don't have somebody that can communicate that properly, you're going to confuse the audience, and it kind of becomes stagnant. So you have to have those two factors. And you have to think, though, if I do a podcast, what's my goal? Mm-hmm. What is the goal of the podcast? Mm-hmm. Is the goal just to entertain, or is it to inform? Is it to do both? Ask yourself that question first. And once you get that answer, then you can move forward and feel that, well, maybe this isn't what I think I should be doing, because it's going to take a lot of time and effort. Or this could be a great thing if I get the right people on the show. I can get advertising, and I can get a lot of listeners to help me, or to enjoy what I'm doing. So that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, I think I've had friends who have tried to do the podcast thing and have failed, right? And they don't.
Why did they fail?
They don't always understand why. But
Okay.
When I've gone back to listen to their shows, it's not that they had a bad show, but I don't think they had a goal for what the show was going to be about, right? I don't think they were really clear as to, what is your show going to be, right? Because if the show is all over the place, right, then it's hard for a listener to grasp, okay, well, what is it that you're going to talk about today? I think that's difficult, right?
No, I think that you're totally correct, Jay. I think that you have to have the premise of the show and the direction of where you want to go. And if you're going to go into this and just to be, ambiguous, and hopefully you'll find your way as you do it, that's not a good idea. That is not a good idea. Sometimes you're very lucky and you do, but very often you do not. So you have to have a plan going in. Say, I'm going to interview nothing but entertainment celebrities, sure, and I'm going to try to get the inside story. Or else you're going to talk about science and get people in the science industry and try to figure out why these things happen, or paranormal, or whatever the case is. But you have to have the idea going in. And if your idea, like you, are to help and educate people, right, then that's the perfect premise to start.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think, and again, I think it comes back to aligning your talents, your personality, and your passion. It kind of works, because I naturally want to help people. It's been part of my DNA since I've been a small child, of just wanting to help people. And so this fits in well with me and what I do. I think the other piece of this, and you mentioned this, is you've got to have guests. You can't. I guess I could do this show on my own. And I've done, I've had those moments, right, where a guest didn't show up and I had to do, fill, 45 minutes or an hour to do a show, right? I've had to do that. But you really need to have experts in the field that line up with wherever your goals are and whatever your audience is going to be. And you have to do it's such a time-consuming process to get the guests, but you have to do it, because it doesn't make any sense to just decide, well, I'm going to riff for 30 minutes to an hour, on a podcast. It makes no sense to do that. But when you have a show that has guests like I have Ray Carr today from Cleveland, Cleveland radio, Renaissance legend, Ray Carr, then it gets people involved, gets people regularly coming back because they understand what the show is about. But getting guests can be hard. It initially was terribly hard for me.
No, it's very hard. And what I had to do is I had to start working overnight radio at 2:00 in the morning. And I had to first I started taking calls from the audience, which was a mistake at 2:00 in the morning. But then after I was able to learn how to navigate through that quagmire, I started interviewing a few minor celebrities around Cleveland. I got a little bit better. One door opened another door. And before you know it, I was talking to Jane Seymour and Jerry Lee Lewis and people like that. And it's not that I think I'm the greatest interviewer. I just worked really hard at trying to, promote my show, just go out there and be aggressive and try to get these interviews from these publicists. So I think if you work hard and you're good at what you do and you work and learn along the way, you're going to make mistakes. That's okay. Right. But learn from those mistakes and try to, just keep getting better and learning more. And you mentioned it earlier. You have to keep growing. If you don't keep growing, it's a very bad thing. And that's how you become successful.
Right. Yeah.
I think.
Oh no, you have to keep growing in this business. I am learning constantly. I read and listened to so many books on podcasting and broadcasting, because I wanted to be a better interviewer, and I was watching more and more professionals interview, and I was listening as, here I was an author, here I am an author, and I'm being interviewed by these different people across the country, right? And so I'm listening to how they are interviewing me, and I'm literally stealing, making mental notes going, oh, I got to use that, or I've got to use that technique, or I've got to learn to ask that question, or how do I weave that in, or just how they're able to do the formatics, right? By the way, formatics is a broadcasting term of how do you, segue into, whether you're doing time, weather, temperature, or, doing a sponsor, right? That's your regular formatics, right? Listening how they segued into those things, I kept trying to learn that as people were interviewing me, because it was helping me, and I still do, I listen to you and I listen to your shows, and listen to how you handle interviews, and you teach me so much so that I can be a better interviewer. And because it's a constant learning process. And then I think what else is difficult for people to probably understand is that you do a show, you put it on a podcast, and somebody's going to listen to this show years from now. I mean, I have shows, right? I have shows I've done last year that I just noticed are being downloaded for the first time by people, right? As they join. So, I'm like, oh man, should I take them down? Because I'm so much better than I was in those first 5 shows, right?
No, I don't think you take them down. I think that you keep them up there, and then people as they go along will see the progression that you have. And I wanted to add to what you were saying, Jay, is that to me, when I'm interviewing somebody or talking on the radio, there's a feeling that comes over me when I'm speaking, that an instinct that I just know that it's going to lead me in the right direction. It's just a feeling that I get, like a musician would have on stage. You just really know, without worrying, that everything's going to work out no matter what happens. Right. And I've done this for so long that I've got to that point. Now, that isn't true in every aspect of my life by any means, but this is one place where it is. Right. And I know that all the things that I've read, all the experience that I've had, like a file cabinet in my head, and I could pull out that drawer and pull out the document that I need to get me through a moment. I just know my instincts will do that for me.
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't want to rely on our gut instincts about something. And the thing is that if you do rely on your gut in this particular industry, you know, doing a podcast or doing a radio show, you learn what to trust and what not to trust over time, because what happens is you kind of shape yourself, believe it or not, into going instinctually, where your instinct starts taking over and go, okay, I can do this. You know, this is going to lead me right to where I want to go. And you start to rely on that, but it takes time. I think you have to develop that over time, and you've got to give yourself that time, right?
Oh, I think you do. I think you have to make mistakes. You have to go on the air, you know, at a low level of radio and just practice, experiment, make your mistakes, listen to people. You know, sometimes you're going to get a really good interview. Sometimes you're going to get somebody that's going to give you 1 or 2 word answers, and you got to have a lot in your arsenal to get through an interview like that and be able to like almost set a situation up where they have to answer it with more than 1 or 2 words. That takes time to learn how to do that. You know, that you're building a scenario that they have to answer. When you get to those kind of interviews and you can get through those, you can get through anything.
Yeah, it's so true. Speaking of getting through anything, we're with Ray Carr, Cleveland's legend, radio legend, Renaissance man. He's got his own show called the RayCarrAM.com. Check him out there. You can just Google up Ray Carr Cleveland, and you will find so much information on Ray Carr, and it's RayCarr. And I will be posting on the podcast, which you can find at jizzo.com. You'll have all the links to everywhere that you can listen to Ray, learn more about Ray, and even connect up with Ray, because Ray's an awesome guy. I've known him for almost 3 years now, and we've just developed this great relationship, and he's been a great resource, and I appreciate him and what he does for me. And he's brought to you today by our folks at Nline Business Brokers and Advisors. Nline represents profitable privately held companies with gross annual revenues in excess of $1 million. Nline delivers the highest market value in the shortest amount of time with complete confidentiality. That is their registered trademark. So learn more online at nline.com. That is ENLIGN.com. And they bring you every week a new direction. And today they're bringing you Ray Carr. So Ray, when it comes to doing this radio podcasting thing that everybody is so interested in, we've talked about some of the pitfalls, you know, and it can be hard. I get it. It can be hard, in that you need to practice and you need to learn as much as you can along the way. We've gone through that. But now, Ray, you know, let's talk about when it really goes well. What are the benefits?
Well, the benefits are that you gather a really good reputation, and then a lot more doors will open up for you. Locally, I can do more public speaking. I can host more trivia shows. More people want me to do things for them. So there is a financial upside to that. And then you know, with the credibility, people want to trust you. They want you to do all kinds of things. You can get better guests on your radio show because of it, because then the name gets out there more, and you can gather more listeners. And so it really is, you know, when you do a good job, there are rewards at the end of that rainbow for you. But again, as we mentioned before, it's preparation, hard work, and it takes a while to get there. But when you do get there, and you get all that stuff, you got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
It can't just be like, oh, I got there, now I'm just going to kind of lay back. No, once you get there, you still have to work just as hard to stay there, and never get. You got to be very humble. Even if you were making millions of dollars a year, it doesn't matter. No. Every time you talk to somebody, you forget about all that. You got to make sure that guest is the most important thing in your life at that moment, and you got to, you know, throw yourself into that. So the hard work has to go through the process from beginning to end all the time.
Yeah, I think this is where people may be reluctant because they've not calculated the cost of doing this, right? And I don't mean just the financial cost. By the way, financially, folks, you could do this really, really inexpensively. You can podcast
Right.
terribly inexpensively. You do not have to have tremendously expensive equipment. I do have some, rather people viewing me. Yes, I do have some rather expensive equipment. You don't have to go to this extreme that I've done here. You can't see everything that's here, right, that I'm running. But yes, there's a Mackie Pro effects board right next to me that everything is coming through. And, these are expensive microphones and they're on these elbow stands, and yeah, I get it, right? But you don't have to do that. You don't have to go to those extremes and have a successful podcast. So I don't want to hear that. But the thing that is so critical is that it is so easy to get discouraged quickly because you will be on the air and you'll feel like nobody's there listening to you. And when you set your show off into a podcast somewhere, you have no idea. It's kind of like you've done it and now you just got to hope people are going to listen. It's kind of the way I feel at times, right? Because the amount of information you get back in terms of, how do you measure how successful a podcast is not necessarily in the numbers, because the numbers don't tell you the whole story.
No. There could be somebody out there that you've never heard of before and don't even know that listens, and you've changed their life, and you may never hear from that person.
I know.
So I do my show for that reason.
Right.
There could be somebody you mentioned Cardiff, Wales. Who knows? There could be somebody in Cardiff, Wales, listening to my show and listening to the old music from the British invasions I play occasionally, and hear an interview with somebody like Billy J. Kramer and go, I didn't know that. It's very cool. Right. And it could either inform them, entertain them, or do all those things. You just never know. And that's why you take every show seriously, and you prepare and you put 100% effort behind everything you do. That's why you do it. Yeah,
I think what people misinterpret, like, my show is a, psychological show, I guess, in some way, and it's an educational show, and it's a business show on some level, and a career show and a life show. It's a coaching show, maybe, I don't know. But I think every successful show has this idea that they are helping people. And people always will say to me, well, how would Ray's show help people? Listen, I'm going to be really honest with you, how a show like Ray, who interviews entertainers or musicians or does music, how does that show work? Because it's really simple. I had the privilege of being backstage with Zac Brown Band, if you've heard of the Zac Brown Band, and I got to meet Zac Brown and his band. Yeah, right. And so my wife and I are backstage. I remember shaking Zac's hand and saying, thank you for giving me 3 minutes where I can escape work and worry and just enjoy your music. Right. And you know what? Sometimes, folks, we don't realize that just getting that escape from the busyness of our day, whatever we do, whether it's music or whether it's an interview of an entertainer, just getting that escape is such a relief from everything that's going on in our world. And we need it. We need those margins. And so somebody's show like Ray's show helps so many people by giving them that chance to escape and giving them a chance to put away their cares, their worries for a few moments in their life, and being able to help people have some margins and get away from it. And I think when it comes to doing a radio show and podcast, Ray, and you correct me if I'm wrong or add to this for sure, that I think there has to be this goal that I am doing this for the listener. This isn't all about me.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly why you're doing it. I mean, part of it is, a small part of it is I do it, because I like it. But in the bigger picture, I want to do it for the listener. And I talked to some of my listeners, and they gave me their feelings on it. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot that don't communicate with me. So, and I'm trying to reach them too. And that's why I have a variety of different people on the show. We have paranormal, self-help, just simply actors, actresses, musicians. We have everybody on the show. So I know that I'm touching a nerve with somebody somewhere every interview I do.
Right. Speaking of which, I got somebody who's watching live on Facebook who happens to be a radio personality, and he does a show here, and he's fantastic. He's our beach music hero in this area, right? And he's awesome, and I love listening to his show. And he was off the air for a while, and now he's back on the air, and I'm grateful that somebody picked up his show, because his show is so good and so much fun. And in our area of North Carolina, where I'm out of, which is the home base, beach music is still a big deal, right? And it's a big deal. So I appreciate him being on. So Ray, when it comes to doing this radio podcasting thing that you and I do, and that you've done for so many more years than I have done it, how hard is it to stay with it? I mean, how many times have you felt like giving up?
A lot. And I know that it's easy to walk away and quit. My father instilled in me that you start something, you finish it. And when it gets to be too much, I step away for a minute, and I start to think why I'm doing this and what I want to get out of this and where I want to go with this. And then I regroup. It's almost like sports, you know, a series of plays in football. You get an interception. You got to come back to the sidelines and regroup and figure out what went wrong so you don't do that again. Same with the podcast. There's a mistake or something doesn't go in the way you thought it should go. You stop and you think, okay, what didn't I do? What could I do? You know, all those things. And then you regroup, but you never quit. You can't quit. I know it's hard. It takes a lot out of you, but you have to keep going if you believe in yourself and you believe in what you're doing.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. I think that's one of the hardest things, is to go, man, I'm done 35 shows. Does it really matter? I mean, really, sometimes you just.
No, I know.
I mean, sometimes, right? You do. You just feel like, I'm doing this. Does it really matter? And I've had some people, and you've done this, right? And you've alluded to this. So some people say, yeah, well, why don't you do a call-in show? Then you know that there's people out there. Oh,
that doesn't work either.
Yeah. Well, explain why that doesn't work.
That doesn't work because only a very small percentage of people that listen to radio ever actually call in the show. So, I mean, if you had, for example, if you had 100 listeners to a show, maybe 5 of those 100 are actually going to call in the radio show, and that isn't always a true indication of what the vibe is out there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that listen in their homes and their cars that just don't like calling radio stations or radio shows, but they're enjoying everything you do. You just don't hear from them. Right. But if you have confidence in yourself, you know, and you have a tight circle of friends that'll be truthful with you when they listen to the show, it gives you an idea that you're on the right path. And you know deep down in your heart if you're doing the right thing or you're on the right path or not. Right. I mean, if you have a good sense of who you are, you can't be full of yourself and be too pompous, but you have to be honest and humble with yourself to realize, yeah, this was a good show, but I'm gonna add something next week to make it just a little bit better, you know. But you have to be honest, and you have to be able to take criticism for you to move on.
Yeah, this is a humbling. I'm just telling people right now, it's a humbling experience. If you've never done any sort of broadcasting and you're kind of like going, oh my gosh, it can be it can be very, very humbling to, you start looking at numbers and your numbers are so small. It can be an extraordinarily humbling experience. And so then that's when you have to rely on, okay, why am I doing this? What are my overriding goals for doing this? And to me, that's what keeps me staying with it, right? Is that I realize that my reasons for doing the show are far different, and that I have to continue doing it because it's part of who I am. And even though the numbers may not be what I want them to be this week or this month, or the last 2 months or whatever, that I'm doing it for a different reason than just the numbers. Right.
Well, I mean, let's look at it this way too. There's been a lot of hit records, or a lot of records that have been recorded that are excellent songs that never made it. And that doesn't mean the song is no good. It just means it didn't have the right advertising or push behind it. Right. And just if you think the numbers aren't good for your radio show or your podcast, it doesn't mean it's not any good. It just, you need maybe a different way of advertising it and getting it to the right people to hear it. And when that happens, then you're successful. There's a lot of bands in rock and roll that were really good bands, but they never made it because they didn't have the right people behind it and the right audience listening to them.
Right.
So, numbers mean nothing to me. It's if you do a quality show and people that know the industry can hear and go, yeah, that guy's really good. He knows what he's doing.
Right.
It isn't about how much money you make. It's the contribution that you give to people and the information you give to people to help them live their lives better. That's important.
No, I could not agree more. We're talking with Ray Carr. He is radio legend, raycarram.com. That's RAYCARR am.com, and you can just Google up Ray Carr Cleveland, and that's 2 R's in Carr, and he is Cleveland's literally Renaissance man. He is just a fun guy. You'll enjoy listening to his shows. He's got something for everyone. I promise you will know someone that he's interviewed and go, oh my gosh, really? You go, yeah, no, really, he did. He's interviewed some of the most amazing people. And he's brought to us today by Inline Business Brokers and Advisors, who have literally helped thousands of clients in the sale and purchase of businesses. When it's time to sell your business, contact the professionals at Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. You can learn more online at nline.com. That's ENLIGN.com. And they are so gracious to be our sponsor and sponsor A New Direction with Jay Izzo as well as Ray Carr today, and we are certainly so grateful for them that they do that. So, Ray, one of the things that I am always amazed by is how many people are downloading podcasts right now. And it is so critical. If you're going to do this, you need to do this in the right way. I believe. I believe that you need to find a hosting company. There's several of them out there. I happen to use one called Blueberry. That's BLUBRRY.com that hosts the show, and then it disseminates out to iTunes and Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. And then I have a Spreaker account, Spreaker, not Speaker, Spreaker, SPREAKER, where I was able to play to iHeartRadio, and that got me onto iHeartRadio and that. And you had talked about promoting the show and why that's so important. And I promote my shows every week. People probably get so sick and tired of hearing me or seeing social media me promoting the show. But I notice what happens when I don't, and I see what happens when I do. Talk about a little bit your experience of successful promotion of a radio show podcast.
If I had, it kind of goes both ways with the radio and the podcast. You have to get the word out to the right people on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, word of mouth. I mean, you have to do all of it. And if you have a sports, like if I interview an athlete, all right, then I try to target my attention to people that are in the football or in the baseball or things like that. And I try to, I know people, I have a lot of friends around the world, and I try to target those things to them because they're not going to necessarily be interested in somebody who wrote a book about the history of Cleveland, but there are people that are locally that are. So if they're sports fans, even though the player was from Cleveland, he was played, in the National Football League, the sports fans will find it interesting. So I try to target them more, let them know, hey, this guest is coming on the show. You're gonna enjoy this. And I think really, in getting back to your podcast question, more younger people are listening to it because it's almost like Netflix. They can just listen to exactly what they want, the kind of podcast they want, on demand. No commercials, basically. Not like regular radio.
Right.
They just listen to the person they like, the kind of guest that they want to hear, and it just goes. And, that's why they like it so much, because it's very convenient and easy access. And that's why podcasts are so popular.
Yeah, I listen to some podcasts. I'm kind of a random podcast listener. I kind of pick and choose. I don't necessarily have a favorite person, but I look for topics that I want to listen to. And so it makes me a little bit different of a podcast listener, but I think that's just fine. I think that's the beauty of listening to podcasts, is that you don't have to have a radio personality necessarily that you listen to. Maybe you do it by topic, because certainly I do. and then pick and choose what shows I want to listen to, and I'll either download them or I'll stream them. And while I'm listening or working out, or I'm on the bike or whatever. And so I think that's the beauty of podcasting that I couldn't do with radio, right? And I think radio is starting to pick up on, oh my gosh, we can turn our shows into a podcast, and people can consume our shows and our guests. And some people are going to love, and this is where I think people need to understand. Some people are going to love you for being the person behind the microphone. Some people are going to love your topics, and some people are going to love not you so much, but the niche that you've created to listen to, and they want to support that niche.
Totally.
Yeah, go speak more to that.
No, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what they want, and then you have to create that. And you have to be smart enough to know where to draw that line. Okay, I know they're probably not always going to be just listening to me, but I have to steer the ship. So if I've got that particular guest on that is going to, pique their interest, I've got to make sure that I highlight that guest and give that guest, the showcase that they need, to please the listener too.
Yeah, I love this though. Here's the thing. How much do you love doing this?
I love it more than anything. I really do. I love to play sports, and I love to, host trivia shows and everything like that. But this is really the only thing that gives me the mental stimulation that I really feel like I'm doing something. Right. I'm talking to interesting people. We're discussing topics. We're doing things. Right. Nothing else will ever touch this. That's why it gets to me, and it'll always be there for me. And I just love it. No matter how much the industry changes, this is the kind of work that I was meant to do, and I enjoy that.
You see, I didn't know I was going to love it. I really had no idea I would love doing this. But the more I've done it, the more I go, man, I feel like I'm in my groove. Like I feel like my talents and personality and my passion and purpose kind of all have aligned here. But and I think you're saying the same thing, where I didn't know how much I was going to love doing this. I did not know how much I was going to enjoy it, and how much of this that we call work isn't work to me. Finding the next guest isn't really work. It's a challenge, but it's a fun challenge, finding when the next guest is. But I love it. Right. And I think that's the thing that people may be surprised by doing this, is how much, once you get into it, how much you may actually love it.
Right. And it's something, but you have to be able to convey the message of the show well, and not make it about yourself. And that's why, right. You never know. Some people are just out there and go, man, I'd like to try that. Right. And I would highly say, hey, go out and try it. Right. See if you like it. Right. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't for you. It will be work. All right. And, sure. Sometimes that work can become a labor of love, but it isn't like that for everybody. And make sure, like we said before, you have an idea what you want to accomplish by doing this. And if you, again, have no idea what you want to accomplish, then I think you're fighting an uphill battle. Not that it's impossible, but it's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah, I agree. So much agree. Well, Ray, listen, you know that we've been on almost an hour?
Yes, sir.
It doesn't feel like an hour to me. I feel like it's been 15 minutes. I say that to everybody who's on the show. I go, it feels like we've just been on for 15 minutes, and I've just had the most awesome time with you. Now, I'm about to put you on the spot here, Ray. Okay, but I know you can handle it because you're a professional. So before I close the show, the thing I always ask every guest to do is, if you could leave the listeners with a new direction when it comes to podcasting and radio, what would Ray Carr leave the listeners of A New Direction with?
I would leave the listeners with this: believe in yourself. Don't be afraid to take chances. And it isn't about how many mistakes you make and get knocked down, but it's if you get back up. And getting back up is the way life is. Do not be afraid to take chances and believe in yourself. That's what I would say.
That's awesome. Ray, stay with me here. Ladies and gentlemen, great show. We've had an hour of an amazing show, and Ray Carr has been amazing. Of course, we thank the folks at Enline Business Brokers and Advisors for sponsoring another fantastic show. I know that you're looking at my Stockyard Cafe shirt. Those are my family and friends down in Nebraska who have been hit with more snow than they care to talk about and cold. I'm thinking about you and the folks at the Stockyard Cafe. I appreciate all your support back home and in Wahoo, Nebraska. They're at 636 East Linden Street in Wahoo. And so I'm just letting you know, I think about it. If you want me to wear your t-shirt from your company or your business, send me one. It's an extra large. You just send it to J Izzo at 2024 Macon Ridge Road, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27613. I will wear your t-shirt on Facebook Live and on the show, and I'll give you a quick little shout out as well for doing that. And if you don't have a business that has a t-shirt and you just want to have a promo because it's your name, put your name on a t-shirt, and I will promote you as a person on the show and let you know to do that. We are so grateful. And folks, as I close the show, I say this every week, and be inspired, because when you're inspired, you can inspire others. And when you inspire others, they in turn can be inspirational as well. And when we do that, we can make this world an amazing place. So folks, continue to be inspired. I will talk to you soon. Ciao, everybody.
When you lost your confidence and the answers don't make sense, you got to keep your hope alive. You got to know you can survive. This is your time to fly. A new direction, a brand new day. A new direction, things are gonna change. You can find the strength to go a different way, yeah. The time has come. Your dreams will take you places you have never been before. Find your passion, find your strength. Don't worry anymore. A new direction. A new direction. Oh, a new direction.